everyone. Thanks for joining me on this very cloudy and windy afternoon. I'm Madeline Heim, health and science reporter for the Post Crescent and USA Today Network, Wisconsin. And this is our third week of I always do that. This is our third week of Newsmakers Coronavirus Edition. And joining me this week is Jennifer Romanin, Director of In Vitro Diagnostics Operations at Promega, the Fitchburg-based biotech company that you've probably heard a lot about recently because they're producing a lot of the ingredients that labs need to run coronavirus tests. And you've probably also heard that some of those ingredients are in pretty short supply when we started ramping up testing earlier, particularly, which is where Promega comes in. But I myself had been writing a lot of sentences about, how reagents were running low without really truly understanding the backstory of what those reagents are and how they work. So we've got Jennifer here today to talk to us a little bit about that and the story behind how they're created. But before we get into the nitty-gritty stuff, I wanted to start, Jennifer, by asking you how this has changed your work life and the lives of the manufacturing staff. I'm sure it's a lot more long hours than a typical day. So yeah, I'm just curious about, how has a typical workday changed from what it was before the pandemic?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So one thing that I like to remind people of is that we've been impacted at Promega since early January, since we have a branch and a manufacturing facility in China. So we started experiencing the ramp up very early and started bringing on more capacity, more capabilities right away. Now, of course, in March, when the Safer at Home order took hold, all of our manufacturing teams and all of our Promega employees were impacted much more personally in our outside lives and our at-work lives. So the first thing that happened very quickly was anyone who didn't need to be on site manufacturing started working from home, just as in many other companies. We have about 250 people now working in our facilities that are coming on site regularly. We went to a shift approach, so we have it so that wherever possible, we've reduced the number of people on site at any one time while still maintaining all of our lines, our production lines. We're always looking and thinking most carefully about the safety of the employees. So, for example, in the building I work in, we have actually different entrances that people are coming in. So if they work on the first floor, they're coming in one entrance. If they primarily work on the second floor, they're coming in a different entrance. So that way we can minimize interaction and pathways. And we've even updated things in our servery and cafeteria to help people so that when they're getting their food, they can maintain that 6-foot distance, even if they only have a 15-minute break. So it's been pretty different. It's pretty quiet sometimes at work, much more quiet than, I'm used to when we've had hundreds of people on site regularly before that.
Yeah, I can imagine that, this brings about a lot of really big changes. So yeah, I can definitely see how that causes some craziness around. And yeah, that is just crazy. But okay, now to get to the question that I most want answered from you, which is what is a reagent and where does it fit into sort of the process of running a coronavirus test?
Sure. So I think the general description of a reagent as a combination of multiple different chemicals or biological reagents like enzymes that are combined together in order to do some sort of task in the test. So you'd have, a single reagent, for example, does one task, and then you'd combine multiple reagents together to combine or to execute the test. Promega makes a number of different reagents that are involved in all steps along the way in the testing process. And in some cases, we combine our reagents to make a kit that we sell directly to a laboratory. In other cases, we combine reagents, we may sell a single reagent to another manufacturer or a lab, and they may buy reagents from other people besides Promega and combine them together to make their own kit or test. So we're sort of involved in multiple different ways. There's kind of two main steps to the tests, which most people will have read about, I'm sure, and seen in the news. The first step is that extraction or taking the RNA out of the patient sample. We sort of describe that as trying to find the needle in a haystack. And that takes, let's say, 5 or 6 different reagents and steps to get that needle out of the haystack. And then the second step is the PCR or amplification step, where you're creating multiple copies of the RNA so that you can now detect it and see it. And again, we're creating different reagents there as well to do that amplification step. So does that sort of get you enough information? I'd be happy to expand a little bit more if that would help.
Yeah, no, that definitely does. I mean, I had assumed it was a complex thing, and indeed it is. But yeah, so I'm curious to what all goes into creating the reagents themselves. How long does that process take, and is it different for different ones used in different parts of the test, stuff like that?
Yeah. Yep. It is pretty different depending on the reagent that you're manufacturing. So in some cases, it could be what we would consider sort of a simple formulation where we're taking multiple reagents, bringing them together, mixing them for a period of time, and then doing a quality control test. In other instances, let's say it's a enzyme, like the enzyme that does the amplification process, that actually can take a number of weeks because we have to get that enzyme out of a culture, a bacterial culture, and we have to purify that sequentially to get that pure enzyme. So that could take a number of weeks. Once we have whatever reagent it is that we need, then we would dispense it. So we'll fill it into bottles or tubes, depending on the use, and then we would kit package it. The dispensing and kit packaging processes are fairly short. So, a few hours to a day to do the dispensing, the same for the kitting processes.
Gotcha. Okay. So it could take up to a few weeks to make just one then, or is that like the combination of a couple of them?
It could actually take up to a few weeks to just make one reagent, so one purified enzyme, for example. And then that enzyme may be what we would say further formulated or combined with other chemicals to make sort of a finished reagent, or sometimes the enzyme is sold by itself as a reagent. So there are kind of multiple paths to get to the specific reagent that the customer needs.
Yeah. So that sounds pretty complicated. And so you had mentioned the quality testing, and I wanted to ask about that too. Is this something where you need to, how do you make sure that it's going to get done the job that you need it to do? Do you test every single one before you ship it off, or how is that measured?
Right. So, a lot of these products, first of all, just to be clear, and in a very good way, are products that we've been making for many, many years. So when we would first design a new product, there's a lot of work that goes into making sure that we know what the correct manufacturing process should be, as well as what the correct quality control testing design should be. And we're going to make sure that we have a manufacturing process that's performed in the right place. So sometimes, for example, we're manufacturing these products or dispensing them in an environmentally controlled room to maintain and make sure that we're not contaminating it. So we were sort of joking, we're used to wearing masks. We've been wearing masks for a long time when we work in those spaces and gowns and things. So we want to make sure we're manufacturing in the right space, first of all. We want to make sure that it's a robust manufacturing protocol. And then we have a certain number of quality control tests, depending on the reagent, either and or. So we might do in-process tests. For example, we want to make sure that the cap is on tight on every single bottle that we manufacture. Or we might want to make sure that, if people are familiar with the terms pH and conductivity, that the pH of a reagent is correct. That would be an in-process test. And then we also do end QC tests or release tests for the products as well. And in the release tests, we're usually then testing the function of that reagent. So if it's an enzyme, we're going to test it to make sure that it amplifies correctly. And as far as how often do we do the QC testing, in all cases, we would, where the QC tests are applied, we would do that on each lot that we manufacture or each new batch that we manufacture.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. So definitely lots of checks to make sure that things are headed in the right direction, for sure. Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
So, yeah, that, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to do it that way. So, yeah, so now just sort of looking at the numbers, I'm wondering, how many more of these reagents you are churning out per week than you were before, because obviously still making the same things beforehand, but how has that supply changed now? And then I'm wondering if you think Promega will be scaling it up even further, or if you're kind of at the peak of your ability to supply right now.
Got it. So on average, as we've looked at across all the different reagents, and there are about 50 to 60 different kits or reagents that we find are being purchased most for COVID-19 testing. We're seeing on average a 10-fold increase in demand and therefore same in production. So on average, it really depends at which one you look at, right? But then you asked, are we at our capacity? And no, we're not at our capacity yet. So we continue to add additional resources. We're continuing to increase the supply of raw materials for these processes that we need to manufacture. And so basically what we've been doing is, as we get more and more raw materials into the pipeline, we'll scale up more and more. As we can get more people hired, again, we'll scale beyond that. So the way that we've been supplying product is ensuring that when we have purchase orders from our customers, that we're supplying them with product every week to the best of our ability. So maybe they've asked for a certain number, but we're unable to provide the entire amount that they've asked for. We're providing them then at least with a portion of that across the global. We provide products globally. So that's how we're slowly, I would say, I feel slow. It's been really fast. It's been just a couple weeks, couple months. But sometimes it never feels fast enough, does it? So we're on our way to more capacity as we move along here, and we'll keep doing that as long as we need to.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't imagine, how quickly things needed to come together to ramp up so quickly. I mean, you can see that in labs, across the state and everywhere is trying to do the same thing. But yeah, it's just, it's wild to me.
Yeah. It's been, if I may say,
yeah.
If I could just really say, I think something that's really been very beneficial to us at our company anyway, and I'm sure at others, is that when we've built our facilities, for example, we build in space for things, unexpected needs, unexpected future capacity. And when we build our filling lines and our packaging lines, we also build them for additional capacity. And so that really played out to our benefit when this first started. We had extra capacity. We weren't running so tightly that we were unable to scale up more than, and that has been huge, I think, as we've been able to meet these increasing demands.
Yeah, that's really forward thinking. That is great to have in place already. Yeah, for sure. Just to follow up on, so you were talking about the raw materials coming in. And I'm wondering, so obviously, in the news and stuff, we hear that the reagents are the things that, we might be in short supply of, but do you worry about running short of those raw materials? And if so, how would you combat that potential issue?
Sure. So again, in a very positive way, these are products we've been making for a while. So we have long-term relationships with our suppliers. We also have a tendency in our organization to carry safety stocks of all of these critical suppliers' raw materials. So, for example, for one of our critical raw materials, we would have been carrying months based off previous history of sales, so that we can make sure we can react quickly. We sell a lot of custom products too, so that means you need to be a little bit more nimble. So that started us off in a really good place when things started to scale up. So then as we were going back to our vendors to check in on them and increase our needs, we're able to leverage that long-term relationship piece. One example that I'd like to share that I think is just really kind of is at the heart of everything. One of the products that we purchase, let's say I'll just use units. In the past, we would have purchased 300 units a year. We have gone back to them and now asked for 400 units a week. Okay, so 300 a year to 400 a week. That's the kind of scale we're seeing. And that we've been working with that vendor for 20 years now. The email that came back from them said, exactly in quotes, "We have your back." They said, "We're getting the people on board. We're making sure that we're running, that we're going to increase our capacity, and we're going to get you guys what you need." And I know this is happening across the industry. We all want to try to make sure that we're scaling and getting to that level. So our suppliers are too. It's just a matter of giving them the right information so they can help us do that. So yes, we're always looking at it. We're a manufacturing company. We think about these things day and night. But I have good confidence based on where we've come so far that we're heading in a really good direction. So.
Yeah. Oh, that's really great. That is awesome to hear. I'm sure that was a good email to receive and a good feeling.
It was great. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. So you had mentioned earlier that, the products that you're producing are going out across the globe. And so I was curious about, the percentage wise, how it breaks down, how much of what you're producing to handle COVID-19 is being used right here in Wisconsin. And then how much of it goes elsewhere across the world?
Yeah, so I don't have percentages. I'm not sure about the answer to that question. I'm not sure if we could easily get that or share that information. But what I can share is sort of reiterating how we're supplying everybody globally. And I also think that it's important for people to understand that the laboratories, so just like we are making sure that we're looking at multiple vendors, let's say for a raw material, the laboratories are doing the same. So laboratories that we're supplying, let's say I'll use Wisconsin because we're part of the task force, the private-public task force there. We have supported helping them to get their laboratories set up with our reagents and some of our instruments that we sell, our equipment that we sell, and so have other manufacturing companies. So when they're determining what tests they're going to run, they want to look at the throughput of the test. Are they running one sample? Are they running 16 samples? Are they running 96 samples? And we provide reagents across all of those throughputs, and so do the other manufacturing companies. So I guess in the end, I think it's important for people to understand that the laboratories are setting themselves up with multiple different tools to get this job done. And as we look at the numbers, we know that we're making a difference. I'm just going to check really quickly. I have some numbers regarding sort of last week, just globally. So we have been supporting approximately 28 COVID-19 tests. So this means we're selling reagents to another manufacturer who's designed a test. They're manufacturing the final test and selling it. We've sold our test kits or materials to over 500 clinical labs worldwide. This would include, for example, the Wisconsin clinical labs that are doing testing. And then since January, we're really happy that we've been able to we have enabled testing for an estimated 73.8 million samples globally. So all of that adds up over the weeks as we continue along. And So it's not exactly the answer that maybe you were looking for, but hopefully it gives you guys a better idea of how all of the different companies are supporting our laboratories in Wisconsin and globally.
Yeah, no, and I mean, clearly, I mean, those numbers are huge. So clearly, Promega is having just a huge impact on, worldwide and also in Wisconsin, just, getting us the things that we need to run the tests. So I don't want to go over your time. So with that, I think we will wrap it up and you can get back to the very hard work that you and your team are doing. But thank you so much, Jennifer, for being here. And thanks to everyone who tuned in. This show in particular will be back in 2 weeks on May 13th. But until then, as always, I hope everyone stays safe and healthy. And thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you.